Hey guys, we're going to kick things off. I'm MacKenzie. I'm a tech reporter with CNBC. I'm going to quickly go down the line, have my panelists introduce themselves, and then we will jump right into the topic at hand.
Perfect. I'm Matthew. I'm a product manager at Celo, where I build primitives like identity, liquid staking, these kind of things. And I'm also an investor with very early ventures. We invest in pre-seed, seed stage, Web3 companies.
Hi, everyone. Thrilled to be here. My name is DJ, and I was that kid that would run home in middle school to play RuneScape. I've been gaming ever since '07, and I've been in crypto since 2016. I had one of the biggest gaming guilds in 2021 called the Metagoons. Did a lot of work with William Wright, the founder of The Sims, Manny Pacquiao, Tyson Fury, and I focus more so on the backstage of what's happening within gaming and a lot of the facilitation. And yeah, happy to be here. That's a little bit about me.
Hi everyone, I'm Swan Sit. I used to be the head of digital marketing and e-commerce at companies like Nike, Revlon, Estee Lauder. During the pandemic, I built an audience of 3 million on Clubhouse in a year, and now I use that to do onboarding and education into the space. Now I specialize in bringing brands and retailers into this Web3 world, but also helping Web3 projects and companies find product market fit.
Hi, I'm Kai Henry. I spent 20 years building lifestyle brands across music, fashion, lifestyle. And yeah, the last 3 years I spent as Chief Strategy Officer at FaZe Clan, which is one of the biggest lifestyle gaming brands in the world. And last November, I started a company called Fewture Studios, which is, it's a platform where I get to collaborate with content creators and streamers and help them bring user-generated content to user-owned content. Yeah.
So when we're talking about Web3, in a sense, the reality is that it is a niche area, mostly being led by developers. You know, Web3 was shaped by these technical influencers like Vitalik. But I want to start this conversation by asking, how do you think you're shaping culture in your respective fields? How is it different to what you're doing in a Web2 world? Let's start there, and I'd love to hear from everybody.
So I think as a dev, the collaboration is the most important part here. It's a very open system technologically wise, which opens the composability of apps. And as a leader of developers, I ensure that my devs, they can work on open source projects, that they are confined to like the tech that only helps that one company. So at Celo, for example, we also contribute to Ethereum code, to dev tools which are used across different EVM chains. And I think like the collaboration aspect is super important.
I was going to say, as far as like gatekeeping and making sure we're creating an inclusive environment for creators, for people that want to join, and then simplifying the onboarding process, because I think we can use the word culture a lot, but culture is defined as like family, a group of people. Like for me, I want to give the gaming analogy with RuneScape. There's no better feeling that I had as a child than running home to my parents' basement and spending 8, 14, 20 hours on the computer screen with people that I never met online before. And this is huge because we're seeing it happen with crypto, and like, you meet somebody, you meet a connection that can change your life instantly, and as long as you can provide value, we're better in numbers. But yeah.
I'm glad you defined culture first, because I think it's a word we use a lot, but we don't really define it. And if you actually step away from Web3 and technology, culture is, yes, values, how we interact, but it's how people self-enforce and reward and incentivize. Because in early stages of anything, whether it's technology, a new language, you all have to be bought in, and culture can't be just pushed from top down. It has to be lived by people every day. So once you understand that, then it's kind of silly to say Web3 culture, because we have gaming, we have devs, we've got fashion. Like, it's so different. So I start by just thinking about, instead of trying to say the qualities, because it's not as like defined as music or streetwear, I think about values. And I think values are rooted in accountability, transparency, community, and I think just by even being here, right, we're all at this conference in a bear market, we're all contributing to that. I mean, I do it specifically by trying to speak at conferences. I spoke at 42 stages last year, all for free, about Web3, about education. We all build together in a collaborative way. I think you know, some of us here might be on a stage talking to you guys, but you guys being here are actually contributing to that culture too.
That's amazing. You're a legend, for real. I would say, like, for me, just personally, I've been working in particular with, like, Gen Z, internet culture. And so, you know, for just going to what Swan was saying, when I'm consulting for brands, whether Web 2 or Web 3, I'm really focused on building teams that have people that innately come from that culture in particular. Because that's really important. Like you said, you got to live it from the inside out. And that lens is really important if you're trying to, you know, be, in my world, culturally impactful. And so, yeah, it goes both ways from Web 2 to Web 3. There's a culture on both sides. There's a culture to Web 3. I think a lot of brands that are moving into this space, they don't really understand that, like, the nuancey kind of dance you got to do to really enter in the right way, and kind of, you know, tip your hat to that culture when you're walking in, and vice versa. So it's a delicate balance.
So I think, you know, most Web3 protocols will have this community of token holders that they have to appease to get things done. It's a very interesting dimension of Web3. You think about AWS, Facebook, Google. They don't have a community of token holders that they have to communicate to. They have shareholders that hold their stock. That's it. Any thoughts on this?
Now, the first time somebody told me about a DAO, but then they told me, well, we're going to let them vote on certain things, but not everything. I'm like, all you did was just describe a publicly traded company, which is exactly what you said. And I sit on the boards of 2 public companies. I represent shareholders. I don't tell the company what to do. I represent the people who have faith in them, who bought their stock. I think Web3 and DAO structures or DAO-like structures are a way for people to have a bigger voice, to have a bigger choice. Because the way public companies work, once a year you get to vote on whether you want that board in there. And that's it. Unless a ton of people buy the stock and do a takeover, which is really complicated and rare, that's all you get. But Web3, with tokens, with people, unfortunately, yes, there's still a bias against people who have means who can accumulate more tokens, which is why I'm excited to see people be able to earn it in different ways, not just through monetary wealth, but maybe by network capital, social capital, impact capital. But if we can create an ecosystem where we have more fairer representation of the community that that organization is trying to help, then actually put them in the right places to help with the right decisions, I think it's a far more equitable universe, but I think it's too early to figure out what that looks like. I'm fine with calling things DAO-esque right now, but a full-on DAO takes a lot of planning and strategy, and it's kind of sometimes Lord of the Flies when you don't have any organization.
I'd really like to drill down on specific examples. Like you guys, as like Swan, you pointed this out, like you come from such different ends of the ecosystem, and I just would be really keen to hear about how you've built up communities in your respective worlds, what that looks like. Is the idea of community built on this idea of shared ownership, whether through tokenization, or do you build that sense of community in a different way? Like how do you define the respective spaces that you're in and draw people into your worlds?
So maybe jumping over the question and just adding to what you've said before. And the question before, I think maybe a bit of a contrarian view is a lot of builders, they don't really need to convince token holders or like a community of token holders, right? Because often it's not as decentralized as we want this to be in the future. And there are like a few whales that you need to interact with. And I imagine, I'm not on a board of a public company, but I guess it's very similar there that you have like large shareholders with certain numbers of shares that you need to convince. And then, you know, retail, they appear once a year at the shareholder meeting and they talk a lot, but they don't really matter. And I think we're still with many L1s, with many projects, we're like in a similar area, and maybe in the future that will change. And like with specific examples, like let's look at, for example, the Uniswap vote on, you know, which bridge to use. Okay, that's a community, but in the end it was a handful or so of voters which overturned the decision, and not really like thousands of individuals.
Could you repeat the question?
Just like, how do people feel as though they are a stakeholder in the work that you're doing? Do they derive that sense of community from holding a token? Like, what builds that sense of belonging?
This isn't token related, but I owned a very large gaming guild, and we had thousands of players. And basically, what we would do is we would acquire gaming assets for them, and allow them to use these assets. And we actually provided a lot of value for them and gave them the ability to make supplemental income that actually allowed people in the Philippines, in countries in Africa, in Brazil, to actually put food on the table for their families, and even buy cars, homes, and it made a huge impact on their lives. It changed their lives. So I think as far as like building this community, it's about impact and value that you're able to actually provide to them, separate from the finances. But yeah, it blew up, and I mean, I think we're going to start to see that more. But even also to add to what you were saying, Swan, I think the DAO model is very early, but it's powerful, so powerful. So I think in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, what we're going to see with all of this technology, all of the newcomers, like all of the bigger companies that are starting to kind of come in, we're going to see a lot of change and shift, and I'm excited for it. But I hope that answers your question to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, I think in my case, it's just been about building brand and staying close to that. It's really hard to balance brand and commerce. And so I think, you know, if you keep your head in that kind of zone, and you have a malleable mind as far as like what your business is versus what your brand is, then you'll get the, you know, community engagement you're looking for. I think with the DAO systems in general, you know, it's crazy because it functions as a publicly traded company, but it's like also having, you know, earnings calls 24 hours a day, 365. So it's a little different in that regard, but it's very interesting, you know what I mean? And again, like I said, building community, it based on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. You know, I think the ultimate thing that I've always tried to do is just like strike that balance between commerce and brand.
I like to think about community in 2 vectors. Commonality of purpose meets frequency of touch. You have to believe in the same thing, but this is the part that everyone forgets, interact often enough to feel included. So take the Women's March, right? It was definitely a movement, huge commonality of purpose, but we all marched for a couple weeks and then it never came back. So I'd argue that was a movement, but not an ongoing community. If you take frequency of touch, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, high frequency of touch, right? People open TikTok 19 times a day, but I wouldn't say TikTok is a community, right? You don't care what TikTok's TikTok account is doing that day. There's sub-communities in dance and gaming and music, but it's a platform, not a community. And so if you think about, you have to believe in the same things, and you have to create places for people to interact, that's how community starts forming and self-propagating. And the one unique thing about Web3 is that you have to make it collaborative and participatory. Web2 brands, which some of us spent our lives in, told you what to think, how to dress, what was cool. And the difference with Web3, just by the inherent DNA of how this new community is formed, you have to let people speak up. Whether it's in a DAO, whether it's in social gaming, people want a voice. That's changing with or without Web3, but Web3 just gives us technical tools to apply it.
So the last time I saw Swan, I was in Paris, and we were talking about the intersection of fashion with the metaverse and how it's transforming, as you said, like people participate in these decisions around brands and fashion. Tell me, like, I mean, you did such a great job about like, just now speaking to like the overall philosophy of how things change when you migrate from Web 2 to Web 3 in fashion. But like, let's drill down and talk about some of those specific examples of how your work has changed from when you were working in with a Web 2 brand and then onboarding them into this space.
Sorry. So what MacKenzie and I talked about this summer was fashion and the metaverse. And I said, I'm happy to chat with you. I mean, CNBC, my God, right? But if you want me to tell you that putting fashion into the metaverse as pixelated cartoons works, I'm not coming. So the funny thing is I gave her this vision of creating a mirrored metaverse where you have a fashion show in real life, then you've got a seamless wall with a metaverse happening at the same time. I was like, that's what I would build if I were doing it, right? Where you stream the real fashion show into the metaverse with texture, movement, color, fabric, but you create an equal world where if you're in the front row of the real world or the front row of the metaverse, you're getting shipped that VIP gift bag in the mail. There's a red carpet with paparazzi in real life and in the metaverse. There's a seamless wall where if you're in a influencer in Web3, you're talking to a celebrity in real life. We did that at New York Fashion Week a month ago, so I haven't even caught up with you. Did it for Vivian Tam. We built a metaverse mirror. The metaverse was super simple. It wasn't cool tech. It was a website that people could walk through, backstage, the runway, the audience. But it was an exact replica, and we treated people the same. We sent gifts in the mail, we sent booze, everyone got a POAP. That got 4.4 billion impressions organically in the media, because people were like, wow, we finally get it. So my work is really about helping you guys are amazing builders. We're building world-changing technology, but we have to make the normies care. We have to help them understand it. It's not gonna be through talking about wallets and seed phrases. It's about going to a website and feeling like even though you're in the virtual world, you're an equal. And a small plug, I'll do a talk with a full video at 2 o'clock on the main stage today so you guys can see the full rollout. But what I love about this space is I work with some of the smartest people on earth, but I help them find a fit for where this cool tech goes.
You know, one question that I always get is, at least on the mainstream coverage of the crypto space, is what distinguishes a so-called Web3 community from an online fan base? Like, is it the fact that all these people own some digital thing that connects them to other people in the community? Like, is that what distinguishes it? Or is it the fact that they have much more working ownership than other fan bases? I'm just trying. Help me answer this question.
I think it's the latter, but I think they have more say over what actually happens within the project or the organization. Like even for for Metagoons, for the guild that I had, in our server or wherever we would post our ideas as far as like what we were thinking of doing, we'd leave it up to the community to decide. Always. And I'll let you go in a second. My bad. But I think people knowing that a project or an organization is willing to put them first over themselves is what draws people to, I believe, Web3 communities and DAOs.
I 100% agree, and I think for the developers it is even more extreme, right? Because you're not on a Discord giving feedback and hoping that other people will implement it. It's all open source. You can deploy your own contracts and leverage existing contracts. It's all open. And you can just build on top of that, and then it's available for everybody else. And I think, just as Swan Sit said, it's about frequency of interaction and the value that is being generated. So, right, on forums, like that's how you build a community. You need to reply quickly and get that interaction flywheel going. And then people realize that, you know, you actually understand what the community wants. You review PRs quickly, like code gets shipped, whether it is from the core team or from outside contributors, and then that's how they develop power to actually shape, you know, what is built as code.
You know, I mean, while I have you, one thing we were talking about yesterday is like this idea of culture also within the different dev communities that exist, and you know, with decentralized protocols like ENS, Gitcoin, Lido, they have these token holders that make up the community, and they all have a very distinct vibe and distinct way of approaching the tech, the way they behave online, their online persona, how they are in person. Like, can you give us a rundown of some of these communities? And
yeah, I think like when people ask about, hey, what is Web3 culture? Just as you said, you know, it's not one homogeneous thing. It's every community has a different vibe, and I think, for example, Ethereum and the broader Ethereum community, like Lido or Giveth and Gitcoin and so on, they have very much the vibe of collaboration, of being there for everyone, of just building the overall common value and helping out. But then there are also other very deeply crypto-rooted communities which are less collaborative, I would say, and just like, you know, libertarian, you're out in the wild and you're responsible for your own thing, and, you know, you can make it or not. And it's less collaborative and more independent, and I don't rely on other people, but nobody can take away anything from me. Like, you know, I'm self-sustainable, more like the people that like are ready for the next world war and, you know, are preppers, let's say. I see both of these.
yeah, it's like an anthropological exercise, going to different conferences, meeting different groups of people. You know, we were touching on this a minute ago, but it does seem like, you know, luxury brands were among the earliest entrants into the space, or synergies with the way, you know, the business model worked in Web 2 and how you migrate that. But I wonder, what are some of the the bottlenecks? Like, what are the issues as you bring these collaborations, whether it's gaming, whether it's fashion, into this Web3 space? Like, yes, there are tools that kind of open up your ability to connect with communities in different ways, but what doesn't exist right now that makes your job harder?
The onboarding sucks.
In what way?
The UI, just as far as the tutorials, as far as how people are able to set up wallets, people are getting confused. When things are on different chains, it's hard to teach people how to have access to these chains and how to sign up. And just the process it needs to be streamlined.
Yeah, I totally agree. UI and jargon are two main factors. I think that, just for anybody that's not in this space, just being able to pull out your phone and just one click away, that's what I'm used to. Like, if I'm interested in something, I just want to pull my phone out and get there, right? So I think closing that gap is one. When it comes to luxury brands in particular in Web3, curation. I think when you're talking about digital products, goods, and access on that level with these brands, there's no level of curation. When you go to these different marketplaces, it's all over the place. You know what I mean? And especially when you have trending columns that are, maybe projects that just happen to be, doing a certain amount of volume. They're sitting right next to something that, if I'm new to this space, those two things don't really sit together, from a curation standpoint. And so I think there's a huge lack of curation.
So on the...
Agree with usability, curation. Tech has to solve a problem. Don't lead with tech because most people don't care. So when brands come and say, I want to do an NFT, I'm like, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to do an NFT. I'm like, well, do you want CRM and loyalty? Do you want a digital asset that's traded and collected? And they have no idea. So it's like saying, if I ask them, what's your favorite music? They don't say MP3. They say rock or jazz. And so saying NFT is like saying, my favorite music's an MP3. So what I try to do is just step way back on education, right? Because they're both curious and skeptical at the same time, which is really frustrating. So I just remind them, okay, when you talk to brands, most of them personally would never buy anything online. I'm like, well, did you Uber today? Because if you Ubered, you not only bought something online, you got into a complete stranger's car. Or if you Airbnb'd, you slept in a stranger's bed. So when you start conversations like that reset the thinking, now Tiffany sells diamonds for over $100,000 online. So you have to find a use case for what that technology serves. So Tiffany selling those diamonds was reaching customers who couldn't make it to their few stores. A metaverse for fashion meant, by the way, that show was during the Super Bowl. No one was leaving the Super Bowl or their parties, but they could second screen on a computer. So once we start having these great technologies, find the problem to solve and the impact that you'll drive.
So on the builder side, I would say there are two big issues. One is that the tech stack is just evolving so quickly, it's really hard to stay on top. And the other, the place of communication. So with the tech stack, right, I mean, this is a very new area of development. And 3 years ago, people deployed with Truffle, and then 2 years ago with Hard Hat, and now we're using Foundry, and then the next thing is coming, and every day new libs are developed. And if you're not spending all of your time here, it's very hard to break in and know what is the stuff that is working at the moment and what will be maintained for the next half year or year or so. And then regarding place of communication, right, all these projects, they have their Discords, their TG groups, then there's a forum, there's GitHub discussions, and you don't really know always where to go and where you will get the replies fastest, where do you get the devs hanging out and not some marketing manager, funneling your asks back until 10 times and you will get a technical answer. So yeah, that could be done better.
One last thing, I think content, there's no content either. There's no content supporting what the storytelling is. I think the communication platforms is one thing, but that's the only type of storytelling that anyone's getting right now, and I think that's really difficult. So content is one of the biggest holes as well.
And everything that we're seeing right now is constantly being recycled.
And what about, on the social media side of things, as you said, the communications platforms, getting things out there, there's been this push into decentralized social media. You've got things like Lens, Nostr, Blue Sky, these Twitter alternatives. It's not the best UX experience right now. It's, building up scale, the centralized players could just invest a ton in marketing to push that scale quickly. those parallels don't exist in decentralized social media. And this is its own conversation, but I guess my question to you guys is how important is it that we get social platforms into this decentralized Web3 ecosystem to drive scale in the work that you're doing? Are you using traditional Web2 platforms to bring people into your space? Like, how are these Web2 versus Web3 social media tools serving you right now, and what needs to change?
Honestly, I think Twitter is still the best.
Yeah.
Twitter, I was able to learn so much in 2016 from just all the OGs, just all of the thought leaders, all of the pioneers. Also, for anyone that's trying to get involved and has no prior knowledge, I would highly suggest that you would go read one of Andreas Antonopoulos' books, Mastering Bitcoin and then Mastering Ethereum. It gives a very, very good overview of crypto in general. But back to what you were saying, Twitter. I think Twitter, as far as like converting people and as far as like educating people and just the amount of value that you're able to receive from spaces, from threads, and actually connecting with people like Vitalik or people that are leading the change in the ignition in the market and the technology, I think is being able to connect with them is huge.
I think maybe top down, if you're a content creator and that's your business, I think that, I don't know, we're kind of seeing the tail end of like the UGC era of making money ancillarily on someone else's platforms, and like you're seeing the actual algorithm produce less and less money for the content creators. Just like in the music business from 1999, 2000, you start seeing royalties decline. You go from, you know, selling singles on Apple to streaming, and then that algorithm starts, you know, causing a problem for songwriters and creators all the way to almost nothing, right? And so I think that right now we're going to start seeing people waking up and understanding, hey, let's use these, you know, UGC platforms as a catcher's mitt to migrate my audience, my community over to something that I own, where I own my own data, I own my own relationship with my community and my audience. And that's another exploding business that's ahead of ahead of everyone. So I think it's really important to migrate from user-generated content to user-owned content.
I think the future is going to be Web 2.5. When we got the internet, we didn't stop going to stores or going to conferences. It's choose your own adventure based on your preferences or your needs. Now, there's no doubt the industry's broken, right? If you sell 35 NFTs at 0.1 Ethereum each of your music, you make more than 1 million streams of your song on Spotify. And YouTube, it's even worse. I think it's like 25 NFTs at 0.1 ETH is 1 million views of your video. That's a lot of freaking views. So the industry's broken. And being able to own that audience is hopefully the future. But the reality is you still have to find those people somewhere. Where are they hanging out? And it is the Web2 platforms. So I think the future is going to be a blend of both, right? I mean, I did 3 mil on Clubhouse, but now I don't hang out on Clubhouse anymore. It is painful rebuilding it on Twitter or Instagram, et cetera. But I still use those to source them. But I think the future is going to be a blend of things, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think everything needs to be an NFT. Not everything needs to be decentralized. Do not throw tomatoes at me. But certain things, like creators and ownership and the work that they do, absolutely have to.
Thank you to the panelists and to ETH Denver for having us up on stage today. And that's that.
Thanks, you,
guys.
MacKenzie.